Hi, and welcome to another episode of Reclaimed. Today's episode is going to be an exciting one because we're talking about survival mode. And while that may sound a little bit negative to some folks, I think it's something we can all relate to. And survival mode is oftentimes our default when we're in seasons of stress or just have a lot of stuff going on. Really, it's this concept of holding on, trying to hold everything together while really on the inside, you might be feeling numb or exhausted or unseen. And so we're naming that today and we're claiming it survival mode. We're exploring how we got there and how we make a way towards God's truth, breaking free from kind of white knuckling life and trying to find opportunities to break through in whatever season that we're in. And today's guest is Brittany Seabury. She's a woman whose story and voice I deeply respect. Brittany knows what it's like to look capable on the outside while quietly unraveling on the inside. Early in her career, she checked all the boxes and performed at a high level. From the outside, her life looked successful. She'd beaten the odds and defied expectations, rising from a chaotic upbringing to build a life that appeared to be thriving. I think a lot of us can relate to that. But beneath the surface, she was exhausted and afraid, living under constant pressure, running on survival mode, and convinced something was wrong with her. At some point, that pressure became too much, and she walked away from her six-figure career and began exploring how she might be able to minister to and support other women that are going through a similar challenge or season. And so, in this unexpected healing time and journey, that really Brittany turned to Jesus to look for her path forward. The fear had begun to kind of reshape, and she learned how to name what was going on and really take back some level of control through God's truth. So today, and Brittany, I want you to talk a little bit about this. You're a coach and you coach other women and you help them walk through these seasons and unlock and name what's happening when we're in survival mode. So before we get into some of today's topic, if you could just share a little bit about your coaching and your approach and what it is that you're focused on in your time with these women that you're working with.
Yeah, well, just like you said, I was in the workforce. I still am in the workforce. I coach on the side, and I think women everywhere are hurting, and we cannot see it with our eyes like we can chronic illness, addiction, or poverty. And because we live in this Instagram world, women are looking around thinking that everybody
Mhm.
else has it all together, and they're the only ones that feel this way. And
Yeah.
that is just absolutely not true. We all have to reconcile. There comes this point in midlife where we have to reconcile the way life is turning out with the way we expected it to. And marriage is hard, raising kids is hard, trying to grow your career is hard. And a lot of those things just don't satisfy the way you expect them to. And the
Mhm.
world is telling you, get the bigger diamond ring, get the bigger house, put the pool in the backyard. You'll have, if you have your outdoor kitchen, like you will finally have this great quality life. And we pursue these things and we acquire these things and they just don't deliver. And so that's typically the woman I am getting the privilege to coach is someone who is stepping into that awareness, into that
Mhm.
understanding. Like I have been pursuing the wrong things, and it oftentimes does involve survival mode.
Mhm.
Women are really pushed around by fear. They're really struggling, really weary. I had a gal tell me one time, I don't want to be CEO. I just want to be okay at work. And that hit me so hard. It was like deep to deep. And so it is. They're typically, as you said, high performers, high achievers on the outside. They are. They're hard workers. They're highly capable. But on the inside, they are living in this dysregulation, this nervous system state that has them on constant edge, you know, worried that the next shoe is going to drop, that
Mhm.
sort of this low grade dread, and then on top of that, they're really shaming themselves. What do I have to be ungrateful for? I
Mhm.
remember when I was feeling all of the anxiety at work, and most of my anxiety has been workplace. centric for most of my life.
Mhm.
It's been a big source of anxiety for me because I have put a lot of my own security in my ability to perform at work. So I'm sure we're going to get into some of that. But yeah, it is, and I was when I was feeling that way, I was just berating myself, bullying
Mhm.
myself. I was the meanest person to myself, but I would get praise from everybody else, you know?
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
always one of the top performers on the team, but I was living in constant fear. I knew I was afraid, but I didn't know why I was afraid or what exactly it was that I was afraid of.
Mhm.
And that's when the shame came in and just like, "Why can't you figure this out? Why is this
Yeah.
hard for you?" So that's the spinning out and that survival mode that I find that women come onto my path and I get to walk alongside in their healing era.
Yeah.
I kinda say that that's what we're gonna that's this is your season. This is the healing season for you. So it's a privilege.
Yeah. Well, I love that you share that because I think, as you said, it's so relatable, so many women, and it's not something we necessarily talk about or share with each other about what we're feeling. This concept of workplace fear. I want to dig into that a little bit because I can really relate to that, and I have some questions underlying about that I think uh, really will help people understand maybe where some of that's coming from.
Mhm.
But I do also want to start, you and I. So for the audience, they don't know, but Brittany and I have become very good friends over the last few years. And I met her because I had stalked her on Instagram and her account, her coaching account, for like a year before I engaged with her, just to make sure that I really liked her and thought she was a legit coach. But then she helped coach me, and I will say I think that point in time when you and I first met and were working through that coaching engagement was probably the first time that I was really starting to be open to explore some of the things that were hindering me from just pushing forward. And I think that those sessions and the conversations with you, I think really helped me open the door to honestly where I'm at now and just being open and willing to listen to myself and my intuition and also have some faith in myself. And you're such an encourager along with just your capability to coach. I think that's something that'll really come through today. Like, you have such an encouraging spirit and you have such a warm heart for seeing women be successful and overcome these things that um beyond just your professional coaching and the things that you're able to do. I mean, your warmth and your kindness and your genuine like desire to see women be successful comes through so strong. So I know everybody's going to get to see that today on display as we chat.
Yeah, and I wanna pull on a thread if we can for just 1 second.
Yeah.
You said something really important, and that is that you were able to connect with your own understanding and your own intuition, and that's what we do in coaching.
Mhm.
I'm a huge proponent of therapy, and there are absolutely times where therapy is more appropriate than coaching.
Mhm.
Coaching is very forward looking. We are going to help you understand who you are and why you are who you are. And so we're going to toggle back and forth between the
Mhm.
current and the past,
Mhm.
because that's important. But what coaching allows you to do is sort of see in the moment, oh my gosh, some of this stuff is still very much with me. But what a coach does not do is give you any kind of advice or direction or, you know, tell you what to do.
Mhm.
We are a good coach, and I like to think I'm a good coach, is I facilitate self awareness and move you
Yes.
into action. So I help you connect with your own knowing. And right, and we are indwelt with the Holy Spirit. We have access to the big T truth because we are believers.
Mhm.
And so it is really working our way through the shame, working our way through the lies so that we can reconnect with what is true about us so that we can then connect with the Lord. It's not me telling you, oh, this is what I see. This is what you should do. This is my advice. It's not a mentor.
Yeah.
So it is very much me or a coach guiding you through that process of creating more self-awareness so that you have more choice and you're not operating in this survival mode, autopilot, just, just
You said white knuckling it, right? It's
yeah,
like
right.
that
Yes.
you're hanging on with your fingernails trying to make sure you don't fall off the cliff.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, and I always, from a coaching perspective, I always thought about it as coaches are great at helping you hold up a mirror to
Mm.
yourself
Oh, yeah.
and asking really good questions like, what do you see? What do you feel? What do you think? And those open, probing questions where you're sort of self reflecting at the same time is what really helps unlock, I think, the knowledge and like, oh, I might be doing this because of this situation over here or whatever. So I
And
love it. I love
processing out
coaching,
loud.
processing out
Right,
loud.
because
Yes.
it's just bopping around in that black box,
Yes.
up here, and to say it out loud and you're like, "Whoa,
Yeah.
I did not." It just helps you get that little bit of a more crisp understanding of what it is that you're believing.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So let's talk a little bit. I know the sort of precipice for your coaching business, which tell us what the name of your coaching
It's
business is.
Flourish Coaching, which
Okay.
I thought was the best name ever when I came up with it, and then I did the LLC in Texas, and I Googled Flourish Coaching, and there's like 20 pages of Flourish Coaching on Google, so you'll just have to say Flourish Coaching Brittany, but yes,
Yes.
that's
Okay. So the precipice of you, I think, obviously launching into this season of being a coach and helping other women was obviously based on your personal experience. And in the introduction, I talked a little bit about obviously in this corporate world, making good money. I think in your role that you were in at the time, like an influential role, right? You were I think of it as like hobnobbing with the big dogs. You had a role that was like meaningful and empowering and impactful, I think, from the outside for most people to think that. But what was going on internally with you at that time? And how did you sort of decide that I have to make a decision on what's next for me, given I can't kind of continue to live like this or, be in this place that's not serving me well.
yeah. Deep breath. Um, I it was a gradual, slow build of anxiety
Mhm,
that just continued to ratchet up. And I, at the time, because I have a different perspective now, having been away from that environment and just the healing that the Lord has done in my life. But
mhm,
at the time, I just felt like as I gained more, I had more and more to lose.
mhm,
And I felt I was just absolutely consumed with fear of messing up. And it wasn't that I was afraid of being fired. It was, I was afraid of what it was going to feel like to be fired.
mm,
I was afraid my worst case scenario, I would imagine having a high stakes meeting, being pulled outside of the room afterwards and being told, "What was that? What did you just do in there? What made you think that was a good idea?" There were some tough personalities at work that exacerbated some of that. There was a work environment, a work culture that exacerbated some of that. But it was also some of my own life experiences that made those things very difficult for me,
mhm,
that made it feel very threatening to me, and I did not have that awareness at the time. All I knew was I was afraid all the time. I didn't know why, or I could not even articulate other than that scenario of being pulled aside and just the shame and the embarrassment that I would feel and being told, "We don't need you here anymore." I
mhm,
don't know what that was in there, but we don't need you on the team anymore. And there was a time that I was driving to work. This was a DC based trade association. and I had to travel to DC frequently. And I was driving to work, and I just began to fantasize about, like, if I could just wreck my car, I don't have to get on that airplane. And I thought I could just bump the person in front of me. I could steer into the guardrail, and it wasn't to hurt myself or hurt anybody else.
Yeah.
It was just so that I could take a picture and say, I have proof that I cannot get on this plane. It would just need me to delay me by a little bit of time in order to miss my flight. And I would seriously consider doing that, Lindsay. I mean, I was that desperate for relief. I could not take the pressure that I was feeling. And
Hmm.
I never did it, but I considered it on many occasions, and it would have to be provable. Like, the picture is part of this whole thing. It wasn't good enough. My feelings were not valid enough just as they were.
Right. Right.
I couldn't say, I can't get on this airplane. I need to
Yeah.
stay home. I have something going, like being honest about that I'm overwhelmed.
Yeah.
I can't make this trip next week, or, whatever it might. I couldn't, it never felt safe for me to express my truth.
Hmm.
And my feelings never felt valid. But so I can see in hindsight that that sort of self invalidation was a frequent thing as well.
So I want to ask a question on that feeling because while our stories are different, they're very relatable in terms of experiences in life and career and some of these things that get brought up in relation to survival mode. And a lot of it is what we bring with us, sort of the baggage we're bringing with us to these situations. But I know for me, when you talk about the shame that you were feeling, um, I can relate to a lot of the story you just told, but also for me, the shame came more in the form of, see, I knew you weren't cut out for this, which is a not good enough story. See, you're not good enough. You weren't cut out for this. So when I think about the story you just told in relation to some of the things that I also went through, um, those underlying feelings of I'm not good enough, I'm not capable, or people won't see me as good enough or capable, that's what came through in the shame.
Mhm.
Because the validation of if I feel like I'm need a break, if I feel like I'm overwhelmed, if I feel like I can't hack it, that means you're incompetent. And that's where the shame came from. And I'm just curious if you like, does that resonate with you, or does that make any sense when you
It
think about
does.
some of the shame?
It does. And, for me, well, let me back up for 1 second. So,
Yeah.
Maslow's hierarchy of needs says that humans need three basic things.
Hmm.
In addition to, food and shelter, we need safety, belonging, and dignity, which
Hmm.
means I matter, right? A sense of I matter, I'm worthy.
Hmm.
And if we don't grow up in a home where we get those things in our environment, we will adapt ourselves in order to acquire those things, in order
Yeah.
to secure those things. And so for many of us, that's becomes people pleasing or perfectionism, or this, whatever we can do to get this external signal or cue that we are worthy. And so
Yeah.
for me,
Performance, being
yeah,
performative,
yeah,
right?
when
Yeah.
we had a coach in high school or a teacher that took interest in us, we would probably, okay, well, if I make good grades, like, I get a little more favoritism,
Hmm.
right? If I'm friends with the coach, or if they see that I work hard, I'm seeing that that gets me more playing time, or just even if it's, a sense of security. And all of this is happening below our level of consciousness. We don't
Right.
know that we're doing these things. We can see it in hindsight, but the worthiness piece for me was certainly, that it was connection, it was belonging, it felt essential to my safety that
Hmm.
I perform well. And yes, if I did not perform well, if I made a mistake, which I really did not make mistakes very often, I really didn't, because I was afraid that it would cost me dearly. I mean,
Yeah.
it would be catastrophic in my
Yeah.
mind. And I still don't like to make mistakes. I do not handle failure well. I'm able to work my way through it. I'm able to move through it in a much different way than I was 10 years ago,
Hmm.
but it is still very challenging for me. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, I can relate to that a lot. I'm with you. I've done a lot of work to move through that, but I had an incident a couple weeks ago and it was so minor and I was ruminating on it and we were going to bed and I don't know, it was late, it was like 10:30 and I turned to my husband and I was like, what if I screwed up? What if I said this thing wrong? What if, and he's like, what are you talking about? It's 10:30 at night. You're still worried about this thing. And I said to him, I said, how are you able to not ruminate on these things? How are you able to make a mistake and just forget it and be like, whatever, next?
yeah,
To me, it's fascinating the people that don't do that because my brain just like sticks on those things.
yeah,
And I was able to move past it by the next day. I was fine. But, it's just, there are people that don't operate, their brains don't operate that way. And I just think that's fascinating. So, all of these things are happening under the surface and thinking about like survival mode and it's building and building and building. You're hanging on, you're going about your days just like literally trying to hang on to things, make it through the day. What are the signs? I mean, other than I know you mentioned the car thing, like what are some of the things that you recognize to say, okay, something is wrong here? Like, I need to do something different.
yeah. And I don't want to say something's wrong
Okay.
because your body is doing exactly what it was designed to do. When it detects threats, it doesn't mean that they're actual threats.
Mhm.
Okay. That's just because you believe something does not make it true.
Mhm.
Right. And that's very important for us to remember here because we have believed, we've constructed our lives around a set of beliefs
Yeah.
that may or may not be true and may or may not align with God's truth. Right. And
Mhm.
we're, I mentioned those three things: belonging, dignity, um, and safety. And we are constantly scanning our environments for those
Mm.
things from a very young age. And
Yep.
we are trying to make sense of our environments. We're trying to understand who we are and how we fit into our worlds. And when we're little, we cannot make sense of why mom withdraws or dad is angry or we didn't get, picked to be played with on the playground. And so we begin to make up stories about what that means about us.
Mhm.
And then we begin, I like to just sort of describe it as a scaffolding. It's this worldview that we build, and we just begin to we think this is the gospel. We think it's true that
Yeah.
I need to do this in order to get this. Again, it's really important, Lindsay, that folks understand this is happening below your level of consciousness,
Right.
but it is absolutely pushing you around. So when you feel like, oh gosh, I've got to get all these things done on my to do list, or you're anticipating this conversation or presentation with your CEO, and there's something happening in your body,
Mhm.
how do you know that you feel that sense of urgency? How do you know that you feel fear? It's because it's happening in your body. And we live in a very disembodied culture. We're not paying, that's changed a little bit over the past few years, and it's certainly help, we all trying to be a little bit more healthy, but we're not really paying attention a lot to what's happening in our
Yeah.
body, in our lived experience. And that unlocks a whole different level of understanding when you can tap into, when you can be present to what it is you are actually feeling, turn toward it without shaming yourself, without thinking, I shouldn't feel this way.
Mhm.
You're actually, your body's doing, again, if you believe that you're going to get invited out of the room after a meeting and told that you're not wanted here anymore, then your body's doing exactly what it was designed to do, what the
Right.
Lord designed it to do. But the
Right.
difference is that it does that, what you're believing is not true.
Right.
It
Yeah.
might not be true. That's when we want to open up the possibility that just because you think it does not make it, certainty. So,
Yeah.
um, so number one is notice the discomfort. Notice what's happening in your body. Don't shame yourself for it. Stay curious with compassion. And the compassion piece is so important. When you shame yourself, you will trigger a sympathetic nervous system response. This is a stress response. So you will lose your ability to hold things in context, to keep perspective on the issue, to hold on to God's promises and provision. You will not have the ability to consider other alternatives or paths forward. You will shut down your it's just the way your brain works.
Hmm.
I'm going to oversimplify it here, but your brain just wants to it wants to save you, wants to keep you alive.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of different things that are happening in your body when that happens. If you if you show yourself compassion, self-compassion, you will resource yourself. You will put yourself into a parasympathetic state, which is a peaceful state, and you will be able to do all those things. You will be able to consider different points of view. You will be able to sit in the Lord's presence and really trust his provision and be able to just to better understand what is actually going on, what you are actually experiencing. So that's huge, is just being present to your felt experience, not trying to shame yourself for it, not numbing out,
Hmm.
not having another drink, not scrolling on your phone, not watching another Netflix show. It is really I call it the work. It's capital T, capital W. And that is being present to what you're experiencing without trying to change it and
Yeah, and I
without
think
trying to push it
I
away.
think one of the things that you had shared with me is like that place of being curious without judgment, right? Part of that is, okay, if I'm feeling this way, why might I be feeling this way? What really happened? What are the circumstances? Without judging the responses to those like internal
Yeah.
questions. And I know that's something you and I worked on just personally, right? With this like constant judgment of how I was feeling. Like I felt like I had to qualify or justify certain things. And so
And
I don't
that's
know
very
if I'm
common.
remembering something incorrectly, but I think
It's
that's part
very
of what you had
common.
shared. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, women think, "Well, I don't have it nearly as bad as such and such," or, "This never happened to me." And they just minimize what their own experience was.
Yeah.
And that is just going to push you away from that awareness and from that understanding.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So you're having all of these things happen to you. The kind of, I'll call it, just generalize it with anxiety. At what point did you say enough?
Mhm.
And, what was your response to that? Because I know that was the point in time where I think a lot of this shift took place for you, right?
Yeah, so I this was in the I often say I burned out before burning out was cool. This was in late 2019. It was really ramping up. Like, I knew this is going to I cannot operate in this state for much longer. It's hard to even talk about now, and this has been years later, but it's just I didn't think I had a good enough reason to leave. I didn't think that the way I felt was an excuse enough, was a excuse is not the right word, was an explanation, a good enough explanation for
Hmm.
why I had to walk away. I had to step away from this job.
Hmm.
And the Lord aligned some things where we had a dispute. I had a dispute with my employer about some compensation that to me gave me a good enough reason to leave. But I was so grateful for it because I felt so, and I talked to my husband about it and he
Hmm.
agreed, yeah, this is worth parting ways over.
Yeah.
And I was so relieved that I finally had a good enough reason to leave. And something I'll share, and I don't share this very often, and I've never shared it publicly, but I think it's important. When I did decide that I'm going to quit, I made a reason for why I left when I called my boss to tell her that I was quitting that job. I did not tell her the real reason being this dispute. I said that I needed to take care of my family, that I
Yeah.
needed to take care of my mother who's disabled because, and it still like makes my chest tight. I didn't feel safe enough to say my truth.
Yeah.
I I did not want to be talked back into staying. I did not want her I did not want someone to twist it back on me, and they may not have done that, but that was my belief at the time is they'll find some way to keep me on, and it wasn't I had escalated this, like, it wasn't going to be resolved in the way that I wanted it to be resolved,
Right. Right.
but I was terrified that I would be talked back into continuing. And so in my mind, I could not stand my ground. I had to make up something that I thought they will not argue with me on this.
Yeah. Well, and it's
Very
fascinating because,
telling
yeah, because you said, I felt like I didn't have a good enough reason to justify leaving. And then I felt like I had the justification
for myself.
through this issue. But then when you talked to them, you felt like you even had to mask that even further.
Yes.
So that's
Yes.
fascinating.
And that's still, Lindsay, it's still very hard for me to share my truth. Like
Hmm.
in any situation where I feel like the person sitting across from me has more power than me, it is very, very challenging for me if I have a different point of view or a different take on things, um, a different understanding. And so let's say we're coming back together about a meeting that we had 3 weeks ago, and I that was not my takeaway,
Hmm.
but it was their takeaway. It's very hard for me to argue my case
Yeah.
still. But what I do differently that I didn't do back in 2019 is I stay curious. I'm very compassionate with myself. I realize, okay, I'm doing that thing.
Hmm.
What's going on? What's going on right now? What is it that I believe? What are the things I'm telling myself?
Hmm.
How true is that? I check in with my body. I understand, okay, oof, I've got that tightness in my chest. That's very familiar. I've got the pit in my stomach, very familiar. And I process.
Yeah.
And this is the I've learned how to do this. And through practice, you build capacity. And then I can connect with, okay, this is what I'm doing. This is why I'm doing it. I may or may not choose to speak up.
Hmm.
I may still choose to remain quiet, but that's okay because I'm choosing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Last time it was just the default autopilot, like, let me secure safety and get the heck out of here.
Yeah.
Now it's a thoughtful process to come to a decision and I'm at choice.
Yeah.
So it's so, so important that you don't beat yourself up, that you just be very, very compassionate. And again, you don't suppress these feelings.
Right.
You turn toward it. You turn toward when you feel the discomfort. That's your cue that something important is happening.
Yeah. Well, and in a lot of work that I've done, a lot of most often there's a question that at some point comes up, which is where in your body are you feeling this
Mhm.
thing and what are you feeling? So you talked about your chest getting tight. I know for me, I feel it like this pit of my stomach type of, it's the strangest feeling. It's almost, I can't describe it, but I know where it shows up physically in my body. And I'm just curious, you talked earlier about this physical connection to your body is doing what it's designed to do.
Mhm.
So, in asking those questions, if people are thinking about self reflecting on how things are going or how they're showing up or what the stories are they're telling themselves, and they think about where this is showing up in their body, is there a connection to that physical feeling and where it shows up to the emotional feeling? Or maybe you don't, I don't know if you know that, but it brought out that sort of curiosity question of is there a connection between where you feel it physically and what you're feeling emotionally?
I think my understanding is it's more about what your lived experience was. So when I
Okay.
was little, and my parents divorced when I was 10, and at that time, because I had this dramatic change in my life, I was getting as a sixth grader gastritis,
Mm,
like stomach ulcers. Like little Brittany didn't know how to process all of this change and trauma, and my little tummy was hurting. And so as an adult, when I feel afraid, it's the exact same stomach ache. And so I think it's more about the age and the experience of your past, and it's a connection to that because oftentimes it's that part of you that is
yeah.
that is coming up. So yeah, so it's more of that. But I will say, to sort of look at it another way, is that you in different situations you will feel different ways,
Yeah.
right? So I may feel fear around this anticipation of being excommunicated, but it feels very differently if I am anticipating putting out into the world, something that's really special to me, like through my coaching, a workshop or a retreat, and anticipating silence in return, because a lot of what you do as somebody who is trying to minister to women and really putting themselves out there all the time is silence,
Hmm.
because everybody's busy, and that feels very different. It's a painful feeling. It doesn't feel great, but it feels more like this sort of stealing of my front side, like just getting ready to protect myself from the onslaught of silence and
Mm.
this anticipation of feeling invisible,
Yeah.
and just preparing for the way that's going to feel. So you will see, and you'll also conversely, you might find that, oh, this is a familiar feeling. This feels very familiar. I still don't really know what's going on, but I know that this is something I've felt before.
Yeah.
So, it's really,
Yeah.
really powerful.
Yeah. Okay. So you're at this point, you've quit your job. Before we move forward, so we talked about the toll that it takes on us individually, this all of this kind of inner turmoil that we have. What about the toll that it took on your family? I mean, you're a wife, you're a mother. Um, I'm I think one of the things that we don't recognize when we're in the moment is the spillover of what's happening to us internally. And I think for me, I that's something I didn't see until I kind of came out of the fog, so to speak. But I'm just curious, do you look back and see areas now of your life while you were walking through that hard period where there was an impact to how you were showing up in other parts of your life?
Yeah, when I would feel anxiety, it felt like plunging through ice.
Hmm.
It just felt like a sudden drop, and I would describe it as almost an immediate inability to stay connected to the things that really matter to me. And
Mhm.
I was painfully aware that that disconnection had happened. Not
Mm.
back before I had done my work, but as I started to do the work, I I could see with more clarity the impact and the way it was, to your point, changing how I was showing up. And it was
Mhm.
so painful to realize in the moment that I cannot sit with my kid and be sitting with my kid.
Mhm. Yeah. The being still is hard, I
Yeah.
think, in this. Yeah.
And just completely disconnected from the things that were most important to me. It's very, and then you've got to navigate that. You've got to navigate the emotional waves that come with that new awareness.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was definitely, but I mean, the work, I always say to women, if you invest in coaching or therapy for that matter, you are investing in everything that you love.
Mhm.
There has been no greater beneficiary of my work than my son.
Yeah.
And it is breaking generational bonds, strongholds, trauma. It's just, it's breaking chains, and
Yeah.
it is rushing and ushering in more freedom into my life and into his and into the future generations. So
Yeah.
it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think, my reflection is I look back on those years my kids were little, and so I had a on my 30th birthday, I had a massive panic attack, like, went to the hospital. I thought I was dying. I've never experienced anything like it before in my life, and I went to a therapist and went to a doctor and, kinda got some things figured out. But what I learned from that experience is, because I thought like, "Oh, this just came on all of a sudden," and the doctor
Mhm.
said to me, he said, "The reality is you've probably been struggling with this most of your life, but because your environment was structured in such a way that it was, like, predictable, you were able to manage it, even though you didn't know you were managing it. And when you got pulled out of that environment or that safety net is when your body kind of just said, okay, that's the sort of straw that broke the camel's back. And we're in this panic mode. And I feel like even knowing that information was so helpful for me because it made me feel I don't know how to explain this, but it almost made me feel less broken because it allowed me to look back and be like, okay, this is like what you were saying, this sort of subtle buildup year over year. You described it as scaffolding, which I think is such an incredible visual, like year over year over year. And at some point, your body has to respond to all the stuff you're suppressing and you're pushing down and you're not processing and you're not dealing with. And that inner work that we do obviously can help heal that, but also um, my ability to be different with my kids and come from a little bit more curiosity, to your point, is it's so different today than I think it was. And then being in that survival mode, I look back too and I'm like, gosh, there's so much I feel like I either don't remember or I missed out on the experience because I was like just trying to get through the day or just trying to, you know what I mean? And that feels like you're robbed a little bit. You feel because I can never get that time back. I can never go back to those experiences. And you talked about survival mode as being this life that we thought we were going to have, but it's not really, we're not where we thought we were, or this disconnect between this image we had of life versus the reality of what life is. And life is hard. And so all of those things, the realizations, there's a bit of like grieving process, right? That I think we have to go through to get to a state of looking forward and moving forward. So was
Mhm.
that also part of your healing, like this concept of a grieving process or, you know, because that's another place that I think you have to be compassionate with yourself if you're going to be grieving something.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I did end up quitting,
Uh-huh.
and as you said, I wanted to find a way to minister to and support women and going through the same thing. And so I did go through coach training at the Institute for Professional Excellence in Coaching, got a terrific education, began coaching in late 2020, and at the same time hired my own coach. And up until that point, I was thinking, look at all I have achieved. Look at what I have done with my life, despite a a traumatic childhood,
Hmm.
despite, coming from a home with, divorced parents and incarceration and a lot not my parents, but just in my family.
Yeah.
That I thought this whole time I was like, look at me go despite what has happened. But what I realized through coaching, through this terrific coach working with her, was that was what had pushed me. That was what was driving me to just work incredibly hard, put all
Hmm.
this pressure on myself, insist on perfection, terrified of making a mistake. That had is what was the fuel. It was not me overcoming it. It was in control of my life.
Yeah.
And when I tell you that I had like that became a I became aware of that. It's still hard for me to articulate the what that felt like. I was astonished is the best word. I mean, just gobsmacked. I just couldn't believe that, oh my gosh, this is what has been underlying all of this. And after that, I knew I needed to grieve the impact. I'm
Mm.
very careful not to say cost. I don't like to say cost. It carries judgment. It's unnecessary. Everything, though, that we've gone through has an impact. Our
Yeah.
experiences do have an impact, and I had to grieve that, and I went into therapy after that to spend time in the past, looking back, processing what my experience had been, to just come to, um, forgive and move forward, and
Yeah.
so, yeah, absolutely, my experience, there was a grieving process because there is an impact.
Yeah. And I'd venture to say that's probably what's hard for some people because that's the painful part of all of this is doing the hard work, the healing piece. That is painful. And you do have to go back sometimes and relive some painful things so that you can then push through and push forward and kind of resolve whatever it is that painful thing brings up in you. Um, so you did obviously did the work, invested in yourself. Clearly, you're paying it forward, I think, with all the work you're doing in your coaching life. But there was clearly like a rebuilding or restructuring that had to happen after I'm sure you processed all of this and kind of walked through with a little bit more intention, like, how do I want to live my life? What are the rhythms with which I live my life? Like, how do I do things differently? So, are there some core things that you do now that you didn't do before, or that are part of this newfound kind of, I'll call it freedom, because I do think it is freeing when you break through these chains of just like surviving surviving the day, surviving your work day, or the situation that you're in.
Yeah, absolutely. And before I get to that though, I want to talk about the bridge to getting to where I am.
Okay, yeah.
And it's because I know sometimes we like to be tactical, and I think tactics are really good. But again, when you're in a work environment where you feel that survival mode,
Mhm,
and maybe you've read all the books and you've listened to the podcast, but you feel stuck and you can't figure out like why you can't move through whatever it is that you're feeling. Well, that's because tactics don't always work. Like we needed to develop and cultivate the ability to be present to what it is that we're actually experiencing.
mhm,
Because if you tell yourself, "Oh, I can have this conversation. I can ask for the raise. I can, do a good job on this presentation." But your body is in survival mode saying, "Don't danger, danger, danger." Your body will beat your head every time. Okay, your body is always going to win out over your head. And so what I would invite women to do, I call it it's your 3 steps to renewing your mind. The first thing is you reflect. Okay, I mentioned a few minutes ago that your discomfort in your body is your cue that something important is happening.
mhm,
So when you find yourself in a situation that is uncomfortable, you can if you can in the moment, just notice what you're feeling in your body. Notice some of the thoughts you're having. If you can't, just put a pin in it and say, "Okay, I know I'm recognizing that I feel this way. I'm going to deal with this another time. I'll deal with
mhm,
this when I get home or on my drive home or in the morning, whatever it is." And then you sit in that feeling without trying to change it, without trying to shame yourself for it. And you just reflect and you just say, "Okay, I'm having that. This is what I'm feeling in my body. What are the thoughts that I'm having? What are some of the things that I'm telling myself?" And you just reflect and you just begin to notice what you're saying and what you're feeling.
mhm,
And then I'm sorry, that's recognize. And then you reflect. So it's recognize and then you reflect. And then you really get into the meat of it. And it's like, what are the beliefs that are feeding these thoughts? What are some of the beliefs that I'm having? Where is this coming from? Um, you know, how true is what I'm saying?
mhm,
How true is it that I'm going to get pulled out of this meeting and told that I'm fired? And whatever it is that you might be saying to yourself, and invite God into that place. Invite Jesus into this moment and say, "God, what do you want me to know about what is going on, about what I'm feeling?" This is really important. We don't do this work separate from the Holy Spirit, from Jesus and from the Father. Like we need them to be present with us because Jesus is the ultimate writer. He is the redeemer of our story, and we want him to come in and help us connect with what is true. And then you reframe. So you recognize, you reflect, and you reframe. And the reframe is a different thought that moves you toward your goals. And this is where you can really reconnect with your values, where you can hold on to some scripture that is really meaningful to you. And you just begin to speak new truth over your life. And it doesn't have to feel completely true. Okay, so it doesn't, because it's not going to feel, you've never had that thought before, it's not going to feel entirely true. It can be just true enough.
mhm,
And begin to speak that over yourself. And what we do through that process is we build in space to not react, right? We build in space to respond, to move forward in choice. And so that work is required in order to live a life of more intention, to get to your question, absolutely new rhythms. I remain in God's word every day. I notice when I'm feeling anxious, and I just give myself, I'm spacious and gracious with myself. I'm just
Hmm.
going to slow down a little bit today. I'm going to make sure that I get out in nature and get some sunlight or walk. I love to walk around in my grass barefooted. And I can only do it in certain times of the year. Right now, it's like really lush green grass. In 2 months, it's going to be all dead. So I'd love to do it when it's nice like that. But I make sure that I'm connecting with friends and family on a regular basis. It's really also doing things when I feel good, taking advantage of those
Hmm.
times that I don't feel anxious. It's not just about how I care for myself in the midst of anxiety, but how I really make the most of the time when I'm not experiencing the anxiety.
Yeah. Yeah. And I heard something, I can't remember. I hate that I can't attribute this to a specific person, but when you look into the world for validation of what you're not, what you are not, like basically, if I'm looking to the world to validate that I'm not smart, I'm not capable, I'm not whatever, fill in the blank, I'm always going to find it
Mhm.
because there's always going to be someone else better at something than I am. And I will
Yep.
always find that validation of that negative self talk. But something you said, which is like kind of grounding yourself in the word too, which is, so who does Jesus say I am? Like
Mhm.
what is the like how does he see me? And as a parent, I think it's been a lot easier for me to relate to that, although I know he loves me infinitely more than I could ever humanly love my children. But I love my kids more than anything. And yes, they screw up all the time because they're kids and they're human. But my love for them, my admiration of them, how much I think they're awesome and incredible does not change because they make a mistake or they act out one day or they're rude to me this morning, whatever the case may be.
Mhm.
And so I think sometimes if we can ground ourselves in knowing that truth too, it helps us be a little bit more gracious with ourselves
Mhm.
because we're not, I know for me, that sort of performative nature,
Yeah.
it felt like if I wasn't perfect or performing or doing what was expected, that love would be removed from me. I mean, that's really, I think, what drove some of this anxiety for me and this like perfectionist mentality that I had. But the more you know how God sees you and feels about you, I also think that gives you some room to screw up a little bit and know that it doesn't mean you're not loved or you're not cared for. You can't come back to him when
Yeah.
you've made a mistake in some form or fashion.
Yeah.
And,
It's
there might be
grace upon
some.
grace upon grace.
Yeah. 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 It's such a it is a healing feeling. Um, that I don't I'm sure everyone listening is not necessarily of the same faith, but speaking from our own perspectives and points of view here, that's impactful as well. So you have gone through all this transformation, and I know you laughed a little bit at the beginning about your coaching business named, Flourish Coaching, and everybody now has that name. But you picked that name for a reason, right? For your coaching business. Tell us a little bit about what that means to you and why that was an important name for your
Yeah.
coaching
Oh gosh, I
business.
haven't I haven't thought about that in a long time, but I distinctly remember. So, I mean, again, when I decided I was leaving my job, such relief. And I worked for an additional 6 weeks. And at that point, I was already toying with going through coach training and like what this is going to look like. And the best way that I could describe what I was experiencing at that time in my own life was just this languishing.
Mm.
And I thought, what is the opposite of languishing? And it was flourishing. And I mean, God, He adores us. He adores you. He adores everyone who is listening to this and watching this. And He has good plans for your life. And He created you to live in freedom. I mean, it was Christ died to set us free,
Mhm.
and that's why he did the work of the cross. And so This is really the work of sifting through the lies and reconnecting to the truth is holy, holy work. And it will it will give you the ability to live the life that God created you for. And it's okay if it takes you another 20 years. It's okay if you just don't get to where it is that you want to get to this side of
Hmm.
heaven. There is grace upon grace upon grace. And he loves you and his mercies are new every morning. And fun fact, our brains do like regenerative work in the night. And so that is true. Like scripture is just reflecting now what we know in science, that it resources itself to heal at night. And um so yeah, that's what it is. It's just about helping women break out of survival mode, and they know it. You asked, how does somebody know it? You just know it, and you just know that this was not, there's more to me than this. There's more to life than this. And I was not made to live in this just state of panic all the
Yeah.
time. And so, and it's true, God created you for more, and he never calls us to go on these journeys alone. I mean, all throughout the Bible there are constant stories of him inviting us to come along and walk alongside and do the work with him.
Hmm.
So we see lots of questions in the Bible God poses to his people, and they're probative questions. They're questions to help people understand what it is that they're going through. And so that's the kind of God we have.
Yeah.
He is very concerned about your internal state. He cares deeply about how you're feeling. He is not ashamed that you aren't getting it, that you are still frustrated or afraid. He never loses his patience with us. He's faithful. And so, but yes, he wants us to live fully in his truth and in the freedom that that brings.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you had mentioned, how do you know? Right. So I think most of us probably have a sense that this can't be it, or I'm made for more, or
Yeah.
I'm made for a life that's more than just hanging on every day, right? More than just getting through the day. And so, if there's someone out there thinking, okay, I hear you, and I'm going to recognize that this is where I'm at, what do you suggest in terms of first next steps for someone?
Yeah.
That's a way for them to start leaning into this place of healing and curiosity.
I love that question, and I would turn them back to the three-step process. Like, begin to turn toward what it is that you're feeling, and sensing, without shaming yourself, with
Hmm.
compassion. I mean, that alone is going to change your life.
Yeah.
And the more you practice doing that, the greater capacity you will build. If you feel like you need help along the way, then absolutely look into therapy, into coaching. Anybody can call themselves a coach. I really don't love that. So make sure that you talk to somebody, have a call with them, check out their website, check out their Instagram page, and make sure they're a good fit for you. Get referrals from friends. And be ready to do some really challenging work.
Hmm.
It is Doing this work was the hardest work of my life. And I tell women before they ever sign up to work with me, this will be the hardest work you will ever do. But it will also be the most incredible, life changing, freeing work that it'll change your life
Yeah.
completely. And it's not snapping your fingers, just like we've talked about. Just because I know I do these things and I understand why I do these things does not make it no longer tender, does not
Right.
make it no longer challenging for me. There are some things that I may never fully, get over or be able to just not be affected by. But the way I move through it is entirely different than the
Yeah.
way I used to. So
Yeah.
that would be my invitation. They can do this on their own. They can begin to, um, turn toward what they're feeling and asking themselves those questions. And then, share with your friends. If you feel overwhelmed, if you feel anxious, don't go under the covers. You
Hmm.
know, the enemy wants you, not only does he want you to feel the way that you're feeling, but he wants you to think you're alone in it.
Yeah.
And there is so much power in speaking it out loud and saying to somebody, I need help. And guess what? The Instagram world, sisters, it's not real. So, in fact, I have pulled away from Instagram a lot. So, if you go to my Instagram page, you won't see a lot of recent posts because I just feel strongly I don't feel the Lord calling me to show up in that way anymore.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, so that's what I would say is that one. And what do you think? What do you think you can do? What's one thing you can say yes to this week
Hmm.
to to move you toward that life that you long for?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, great practical steps. I couldn't emphasize more the concept of it does take a lot of work. And there's moments like I just honestly, it's like I just want to give up. I don't want to do this anymore. This is hard. This is painful. But to your point, on the other side of it, I'm so glad that I did it and I stuck with it. And again, it's not about perfection or you come out of it and just nothing goes wrong in your life again, but it's such a different perspective and you're able to move through the hard things with much more ease and graciousness for yourself. So I would encourage anybody that feels like they're stuck or they're in a position where they're kind of white knuckling things and they're not really sure how to get out of that mode, to do some of the things that Brittany just mentioned and, invest in yourself. A lot of this white knuckling is also, we've spent a lot of time caring and thinking about others and not a lot of time caring and thinking of ourselves. And you're worth the investment. And when you are better, you're actually able to give in such more abundance to the people that you love and that are around you. So, with that, I know you said you're not on Instagram anymore or not anymore, not as much anymore, Brittany, but how could someone, if they're like, this is my person, I want to get in touch with her, how can people get in touch with you? And I'll put it in the show notes as well. But just tell the audience, like, but what's the best way to find you if they're interested in a conversation with you?
Absolutely. My website is flourishwithbrittany.com, and you'll read a little bit more about what type of women I typically coach, what kind of outcomes to expect. There's also a little blurb on me, myself, and sort of my story. And then there's a contact me, and you can just schedule a discovery call, an introductory call, and we'll hop on a call for 30-45 minutes and we'll talk it through. And if it sounds like we're a good fit and you're ready to do that challenging work, then I would love to work with you. And if not, wish you the absolute best and hope that you got something out of this conversation. And God has big plans for you, and He's going to lead you where you need to go. So.
Yeah. Thank you. Or, like I did, I stalked Brittany for about a year before I reached out to her for all those reasons. But God kept bringing me back to her page over and over and over again. So I love that. Well, Brittany, thank you so much for joining us. I think this conversation is so meaningful. And I think a lot of people can relate to your experience. And thank you for just being vulnerable to share with us how I love the fact that as a coach, you actually have a real life experience that you're bringing to your coaching. And, I always think of it as like, I don't want someone who's never had to lose weight to tell me how to lose weight. I want someone that had the experience and they know all the things that I'm struggling with to help me out. So I think you can bring all those real life experiences to your coaching and to the women that you're working with.
Yeah.
And I just want to plug Brittany. She's just been an amazing coach and friend. And if you reach out to her, I think you're going to find that it's a good fit, and she's just going to walk you through and help you through these experiences in such a profound way. So again, thank you for joining us. I really appreciate it all.